going on to the art of pivoting successfully in the business world. So, change is inevitable in business, but how do you pivot for success without risking it all? Our speakers will discuss navigating strategic pivots for profitability. So I'd like to introduce Sarah Warboys. Sarah Warboys is the Venture Strategy Director at Sanuel Ventures, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
That's right.
That's great. And then we've got Rhys Davis, the co-CEO and co-founder at Investor Hub. So we've got a bit of a session, an hour-long session today. Oh, half an hour.
Half an hour.
Keep talking for an hour if you like.
That's okay. It's really whatever you want to do. Okay, well, I'll hand it over to you guys, but enjoy. A big warm welcome to our panel.
Thank you. Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah. So I'm, as mentioned, at Sanuel Ventures. That's the family office of Lee Jasper. He built and sold Aconext ultimately to Oracle for $1.6 billion. So we have a portfolio of about 60 companies. And at the moment, I'm actually excited because I get to interview Rhys, and Rhys is one of my portfolio companies, so I also angel invest. So it's just kind of like an investor catch-up at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm happy to be able to interview Rhys, and essentially what we're going to try and bring out is the story behind pivoting from a profitable, well, pretty much profitable company to throwing it all in and starting again. So I'll hand over quickly to Rhys to give a bit more background on himself and on Investor Hub.
Hi guys, I'm Rhys, one of the co-founders of Investor Hub. Before that we were called Fresh Equities, so that's the pivot story we're talking about today, how we went from a profitable two-sided marketplace to starting again from scratch at the start of 22 and building back up to be bigger than we were then very rapidly since in the last 2 years.
Yeah, so just to recap, so Investor Hub is like you're digitising the investor relations function, so for listed companies. And just go back to the start of the journey, so maybe we'll go into the middle of the journey. So the point of the pivot. Rhys, if you don't mind taking us back to about 2021 or the end of 2021, and the key factors that led to your decision to pivot.
Yeah, sure. I'll give some context on what Fresh Equities is and what Investor Hub is. I realised I probably skipped over that.
You did.
So Fresh Equities, we were trying to solve a problem that we'd identified at the start of 2018, which was secondary placements on listed markets. So specifically, if you're a listed company, you had to raise capital. We'd seen a lot of existing shareholders at the time complaining that they were on the cap table, they met requirements, they never got the phone call, they never got the email, they missed out, and they were devastated, right? And as a tiny startup at the time, they're like, this is insane. You have someone who wants to give you money and you didn't even call them, like you have their email, why would you not do that? So that became this journey where we built this sort of two-sided marketplace to sort of help with the discovery of and access to listed placements. And we very rapidly went from people who didn't know anything about the placement market to half of all listed deals were on our platform. We put about $600 million into Australian listed businesses over the period of the life of the business. So it grew very, very rapidly, and we sort of went from a team of 0 to a team of 30, and we decided to turn it all around at the start of 22. So the factors that were sort of driving that, we'd grown very, very rapidly to be half of these deals, and we started to reach a point where we're trying to be like, how do we get a company to, instead of using a traditional broker, a 100-year-old brand, use this website to run their entire deal, because we'd gotten to the point where our investor base was saturating effectively into these listed placements. So we started spending a lot more time working with the company, like what will we need to do to get this company to choose us over another brand, when basically we're both offering money, and money has 100% product market fit all of the time. So what can we do differently? And as we started to spend, because we were obviously focused on the investor as a platform, and as we started to spend more time working with these companies, we realized the only thing we had that they didn't have was the email addresses of these investors, and the knowledge that the barrier was friction, if that makes sense. We just taken all the friction out of the process for them to discover and access, and through that process, millions of dollars were being bid into these deals that would otherwise have gone dormant. And so we're sort of spending it. We spent all of 2021 being like, well, how do we solve this? How do we solve this? And we had this moment at the end of 2021 where a company that we'd worked with a couple of times, about half a $1 billion biotech company, was going out to market, and they didn't want to do a placement, which was sort of our bread and butter. What they wanted to do is run what's called an SPP, share purchase plan, with their existing investor base. But they had no idea if the money was there, because like there was no method to do that, right? And so instead of trying to sell them to use our solution, we said, well, why don't we take everything we've built and point it at your investor base, your shareholder base, and see if we can use the tools and the tricks that we've built to run these type of processes to help you run a better SPP. So they're trying to go out to their...
Clarify, SPP?
Share purchase plan.
Yeah.
So that's where you can raise up to $30,000. This is simplifying. You raise $30,000 from your existing shareholders if they're eligible at the time of the offer. They typically run for about 2 weeks, and they tend to, be very variable in terms of their outcome. And so what we did, the company wanted to raise $20 million. We ran an analysis. We got a bunch of our data guys on their shareholder base. And we said, we think it's possible. The thing that was unique about this company is that one of the directors there had this personal philosophy, which is anywhere an investor asked a question, he would answer it. And the result had been they had this fanatical retail shareholder base. The people would show up to their AGMs in costume as the director who was answering questions because he'd worn a Hawaiian shirt on a Zoom call once during COVID. And so that was now the uniform to show that you were amongst your people. And they would show up to the AGM and then they would all go out for drinks together afterwards. And they built this community just around this company. And so we said, okay, we think the intensity's there, we think the data's there, let's build the tech. So we built a platform very rapidly to sort of run their SPP. And the good news is after 2 weeks, they didn't raise 20 million, they raised 40 million. And they got to pick the 30 million out of that they actually, was the highest quality to them. And so
they could choose their investors.
Yeah, and they'd saved all this money on the deal fees. So placement fees are usually on average around 6%, right? So it's a pretty high clip of the ticket for the money being raised. And we're suddenly, Ben and I went away for Christmas, Ben, my co-founder, and we came back and we said, what if we're solving the wrong problem? What if we're trying to solve the problem of how do we get companies to use us, where the problem we should be solving is how do we get the company not to need us at all? And that was sort of the initial kernel that started the process.
Got it. So you changed from investor is our customer to the company is our customer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So to round that out, so that was essentially going from a marketplace where you'd have investors looking at fresh equities, trying to find deals to participate in, to a B2B SaaS platform where the companies are now paying to use your platform. That's kind of the idea, right?
So, yeah, the basic premise at the start of it is like, what if we could give every company their own fresh equities? So rather than have one and try to aggregate everyone onto us, what if we could spread the love, spread the technology across the people? How would that work?
Yeah, amazing. And so how long did that process take, the actual process of pivoting take? From initial consideration to like full implementation, we've done it.
So we went from starting to discuss it at the end of January to in production in June to $1 million of ARR by December.
That's pretty impressive.
It was
$1 million of ARR is impressive.
Yeah, it was a very quick process to really move that around. But that was part of the reason we did that. Is one of the decisions we felt that we had to do as a business. So we're a 30-person startup. How do we make this transition? How do we do both? And the decision we made was we can't. We had to be willing, where we initially called it Project Cortez, because we believed to do this, we have to be willing to burn the ships so that we could be successful in this new business. So we basically scaled our entire team off our existing business, took our revenue to zero because the models we saw as competing, right? One was like trying to get you to use our investor base to raise capital, and the other was trying to give you the tools to raise it out of your own investor base. How can we make it so that people didn't think we were just trying to steal their investors and put it into this platform that we made money on? We demonetized it, we turned it off, we moved the whole team. And to do that, we had to say we need to get to $1 million ARR so that we could raise capital to sustain.
So how did you communicate that to your existing, well, to your team and your customers, your existing customers and your stakeholders?
Yeah, it was so the start of the process for us was really, we sat down with our senior leadership team, such as it was, and said, we think there's a better opportunity here. We need to test it against you guys to see why we're wrong, because this is obviously a pretty, at the time we didn't know we were going to burn the ships, but at the time we were sort of like, we want to go pursue this new model, what can we do? And we ran through a pretty rigorous strategy process to really like pull it apart versus what we were currently doing and see what the competitive tension would be. Once we kind of had gotten to a point where everyone in the room was sort of like, yeah, this makes sense, we should do this, we then took it to our board and were saying, hey, we've got this plan, it's risky, it's very different to what we're currently doing. To do it, we'll probably have to take on, very different to the last talk, a lot of risk to pull this off. But I think if we're right, we'll have a business that we can scale not just in Australia, but internationally. And ultimately, our goal was to build a really, really big business. So we needed to make sure that we could see those future horizons outside of Australia. And that was the tipping point.
Yeah, gotcha. So you started with your team. Then I remember a call from Ben, the co-founder. So that was when the investors' calls must have kicked off.
Yes.
And then I think go to market. So then the team were on board building product, and then you said basically started selling in May.
Well, we started building and talking to customers simultaneously, if that makes sense, right?
Yes.
Part of the decision process as well was, what do we do about our team? We have 30 people. We're going to go to zero revenue. Do we reduce the team down and rebuild effectively, or as we decided to do we keep the team and just grow really, really quickly? And so what that there was a business logic and then there was a personal logic. The business logic was we'd spent sort of 3 years building a team that were experts in how to do our business, and so if we were going to scale down, we're eventually going to have to scale back up into those same people if we were right. Two, we needed to move really fast, and to do that, we therefore needed resources, we needed people, and we needed people who we didn't have to explain what we were trying to do. And three, we thought strategically, we didn't want to. We were creating the risk into the business, so as long as we felt comfortable that we could mitigate it, we didn't want to then push that risk onto the team who was sort of coming along with us. And that was sort of the decision making there. So that's how we were able to move very quickly and do both.
And so what were the biggest challenges that you faced? Because it sort of sounds like from the outside, you decided to pivot, you brought everybody on board, you built it, you sold it, and then you got $1 million revenue. It's never that easy.
No, yeah.
So what were your biggest challenges?
Well, personally, I was, at the time we decided to pivot, my wife was 3 months pregnant, so I had a kid coming right at the middle. And so basically there was the ticking clock was ticking for multiple reasons. Some of the bigger challenges were, while we had a team that understood the business that we had been doing and could understand the business we were doing, one thing we hadn't fully anticipated, and this is probably just a thing as founders, is what that change in risk profile does, if that makes sense, and how it affects different people differently. Some people found it exhilarating. Some people found it, very, very challenging. And despite the fact that we said continuity, we've got a continuity business plan, we've got we know all the milestones we need to hit, and we're ticking them off along the way. I think that was definitely a challenge. We spent a lot of time keeping the team together and keeping the team positive, effectively, on the direction we were taking. That was a bigger challenge, I think, than we expected. And then, as in all startups, other challenges came up where everything goes wrong all the time. So we had major partners that we were integrated with that decided right before we went live that they pulled out, and so then we had to basically plan B, rebuild an entire part of our product around a new partner within the month so that we could get to the launch date that we'd promised customers who'd started to sign up for the initial beta to come on board. So technical challenges and people challenges were probably the two.
Just conscious of the timing challenges as well, given the state of the market at that point, because what are we? We're peaking. Pure FOMO deals are happening at the end of 2021.
Oh, yeah, I had totally forgotten about that. So at the point we're deciding to pivot from being a marketplace business to a SaaS business, it's the end of 2021, so SaaS valuations, 20 plus X multiple on revenue. So the logic of if we get to $1 million revenue, we'll be able to raise capital and use that to continue to grow made total sense in January of 2022. And by June of 2022, the markets, both the listed markets and the capital markets for private businesses, were all trending down dramatically. So there's definitely a challenge around, okay, is this business still going to be viable? Is the market still going to be there? Is it going to be a complete collapse and recession? Where are we going to end up at a macroeconomic level, and how are we going to manage around that? That was fun navigation.
Yeah, I remember just as a sidebar taking calls from, I think it was Ben actually at the time, there were a few investors that were interested, and then I think there was one lowball deal, and then we were debating who would be best to come in, and kind of what was their, I guess, where could the company land, and would you take this one even though the terms aren't as good? And
so we were very fortunate at the end to be able to raise. I think we managed to raise and get money in the bank on December 31st of that year. But that whole process of capital raising was also an interesting one, just trying to find if there's still a capital market, particularly at the time, the VC market had really shut down. We're very risk off, and we were obviously very fast growing, but very risk on as a business.
Yeah, absolutely. Were there, actually, maybe just a point on Because you weren't co-CEO at the time.
No.
I feel like there was like an internal shift, wasn't there, around who did what throughout that process.
Yeah, it was an interesting transition. So as we got to the June kickoff, we started to realize, or my co-founder Ben is obviously, I was on my background is the tech side, I'm the engineering side, he's the salesperson, the market side person. We realized to make these metrics that we needed, the best salesperson was going to be Ben. And so he called me up on a Friday, I think at the end of June, and said, for this to work, I need to be all in on sales, which means I can't be CEO right now. So I'm going to step down as CEO, be just salesperson Ben, and I'm going to give you the temporary thing to pick up all of that components, so that we can just drive at this. My co-founder and I we're friends because our wives grew up across the road from each other when we were. So he was the vetting couple for me when I met my now wife, and so the fact that we had that trusted relationship where he felt he could be like, hey, I'm going to basically give up power so that we can focus on this thing that'll be important. And we'll see how it goes. And that turned out to be the right decision, but it was an incredibly brave one by him.
I think it was brave for both of you. I liked the way, so when we were chatting about this beforehand, I think there was a term for it internally, saying Ben's going full superhero mode.
Yeah.
So,
it's going superhero mode, yeah.
He's in superhero mode.
Yeah.
I used that in a call earlier, actually.
Well, I think that was also, like I talked about, one of the hard things for the team is always, is this going to work? Is it, some people had joined us very early on in the first startup, so they'd sort of gone from that 0 to 1 phase. But for a lot of that team, the 0 to 1 phase was brand new, so how do we know it's going to work? One of the things that I think really helped cement that was Ben going superhero mode, and through that basically demonstrating like, yes, we can hit this. We've got the team, we've got the knowledge, we've got the market right. This is going to work. That was a really hard thing to maintain.
I feel like that needs to be in the pivot playbook. Someone goes superhero mode.
Yeah, you need to go above and beyond. You can't just it's not business as usual.
No. So were there any unexpected benefits or drawbacks that happened after the pivot?
Unexpected benefits or drawbacks. Some unexpected benefits was as we got to understand companies better and as we started working them more as customers, we just kept finding that our initial insight around the problem was on the money, but that the problem was a lot deeper than we expected, in the sense that listed companies really just don't know where the next shareholder is going to come from. And they are spending a huge amount of money on service providers to try and help them solve that problem, but ultimately that direct ownership model was an issue. And the more we dug at that, the more we found that that market was actually crying out for a community, in a sense, of someone talking about this problem. So what we started the Chairman's Society, I think we called it, which is basically starting to bring those CEOs together to sit around the table and have a talk.
Great name.
Yeah, to talk about the challenges of being a listed director and listed CEO. And through that process of just us hosting these dinners, us not asking for anything, we weren't hosting them as a sales event, we were hosting them as a give. We just learned that there was so much more depth to this problem than we initially anticipated, and we got a lot of goodwill off the back of it. Unexpected challenges. Dealing with listed markets, there's always just complexity in getting access to data, and just constantly finding out that market data is messy, it is legacy, there are so many odd things within every company's sort of listed market data that you then have to just keep adjusting for, keep fixing, keep patching, which is unexpected. You'd imagine that market data should be sacrosanct and really well put together, and we found both here and in the UK not so much the case.
Yeah, gotcha. And I think, because you had a name change in there somewhere as well, didn't you?
Oh yeah, we liked fresh. We wanted to keep fresh initially, so we were like, what can we be? We tried to make a quick decision, let's be fresh.xyz. Through that process, we found out that actually, even though Google owns .xyz, so it should be fine, what we found out was, because it was so cheap to buy XYZ emails, a huge number of scammers had bought .xyz domains and just absolutely destroyed any credibility of the .xyz domain. So if you were sending to a Microsoft account from .xyz, it would just immediately be filtered out regardless of business, regardless of context. So we then had to go through a full name change to a new brand just to fix the email deliverability problem of .xyz, which was unexpected and fun learning.
Another one for the playbook.
Yeah, I always tell people now, just get the .com. I know that seems cute to not have the .com, but just get the .com. It's safe.
Got it. And I'm just trying to think through. We've got a couple of minutes left, but maybe rather than how did the team adapt to the new direction, maybe what didn't change? So if we can kind of focus there.
Yeah. One thing we'd spent a lot of time on, and I think what enabled sort of the pivot to work was we invested a lot into culture. We spent a lot investing in the team, liking each other, wanting to work together, spending time with each other outside of work. We maintained that commitment to those kind of investments, even as we're starting getting more cost conscious and cutting things and making sure we're not overspending. But we made sure we kept investing in the culture, and we think that led to us to be able to power through the ups and downs, the roller coaster, right? Which is the team bonding together and coming together was always the thing that helped us get through whatever the hump was. And the culture didn't change. Also, the focus on the problem we were solving really didn't change. We wanted to help shareholders get better access to companies and companies to get better access to their shareholders. So the through line for us, even though the business looked vastly different at the end of the first year to what it was the year prior, the through line never changed in terms of the problem we were trying to solve and who we were trying to help.
Yeah, and maybe the one thing we haven't talked about is the fact this wasn't your first pivot.
Oh, yeah.
So
it was the first time we turned off profit to do it.
Yeah, okay. So, it's probably the first pivot where you really did risk everything.
Yeah, so I mean, prior to being Fresh Equities, we were deal pad for like 8 months, which was effectively trying to solve the capital raise problem, but for the private markets. And that business did not work. But what we got challenged by, which we ended up, why we're in the public space in general, one of our investors said, why don't you try to solve it for listed companies? And at the time we thought no one would let us, and tried it. Through that we kind of built a process, which is probably also where our confidence came from, that we knew how to very rapidly explore and execute on a new idea in a new market with a new solution, and how focus is so critical. You can't be split focus. You have to be we've just got one thing we need to do. We've just got one metric we need to move. We can't be focused on the other opportunities that might pop up. We need to nail this one.
I mean, that's really good, even if you're not pivoting.
Yeah.
Good advice.
Yeah. Focus tends to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And it certainly rewards you if it's focused in the right direction.
Yes.
And
being right, you got to be right.
Yeah.
If we were wrong, I would not be sitting here telling the story.
Yeah, well, you'd still be focused. But
yeah, exactly.
So I guess maybe just to recap, so some takeaways. So the one thing I took away was that you did build up a bit of a playbook really around what it is to pivot a business, what it is to execute efficiently, but what it is to also move a team to execute efficiently. Being very clear on the target that you needed to hit, so that 1 mil ARR, like Superman mode metric was, I think, quite key.
Yeah.
I think perhaps one thing that we didn't get into, but I'm conscious of time, was just, I know we've talked about it though, like investing in customer service. And so you had mentioned something, maybe if you just want to...
One of the other things, and this is what we learned in the, which sort of echoes some of the conversation they had up here just before this one, in the first pivot was effectively, you're not going to be able to build everything, so you need to really overinvest in customer success. You need to have a team of people who can help someone adopt a new product that's still going through its building phase, that's still going to have challenges, and you need to overinvest in the relationship, particularly in a B2B relationship, early, because that's what's going to help you get the early adopters to be advocates, get those advocates to help you build the product with them, as opposed to just sort of you see their login details and that's it. You really need to make sure that you're investing in being very close. To do that, we created what was called like a clues channel in Slack. So anyone who had any interaction with a customer was required to like write up the clues that they'd taken away from that conversation. What insights had they derived that we could then keep sharing forward, and then everyone was required to go through that channel and distill, synthesize, so that we could stay on top of the market now.
That's great. There are a few others, so don't buy .xyz domains was on.
Don't buy .xyz domains, yeah.
And maybe just, given we've only got a couple of minutes left, I know that you guys are growing, well, because I get to see the numbers, very rapidly now, which is very exciting, and that you're on a unicorn building pathway. So maybe just to give us your big, hairy, audacious goals, definitely a place to look for future work opportunities for anyone who's interested.
So I mean, we launched in the UK at the end of last year as well. So we've now got, we're working on the LSE and the ASX. We're expecting to have something similar happen in the US and Canadian markets in the next 12 months as well. So watch this space, because what we've identified is this is not just an Australian listed markets problem, it's all listed markets have the same problem. And so there's a really cool opportunity to just help shareholders and companies get closer together everywhere.
Amazing, there you go. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Trace.